Okay.
Hello, connected community. I'm Shariq Yosufzai, and we're here in Minneapolis, Minnesota with 4 key executives. And we're going to talk a little bit about sustainability, innovation, and the future. It's really appropriate that we are here in Minnesota because, as you may know, it's the home of the very distinguished Carlson School of Management, which conducts a startup and innovation contest, and it's called the Minnesota Cup. And the Minnesota Cup focuses on 3 items of focus: energy, clean water, and clean technology. And we have 4 distinguished panelists here that will address what each of their companies are doing in some or all of these areas. Before we actually get into the introduction of the panelists, I'd like to take a moment and thank the American Institute of Chemical Engineers Foundation, which I'm very proud to be the chair of for the next year. My day job is I'm the Vice President of Global Diversity for Chevron Corporation. And we are so blessed that 5,195 individuals and over 100 companies have pledged almost $8 million towards a $15 million goal in creating a campaign called Creating a World of Good. So our thanks to all the donors and the AIChE Foundation. Now let's turn to the topic at hand. And as I mentioned, we have 4 distinguished executives, starting with Shawn Feist, R&D Director, Global Innovation and External Technology, the Dow Chemical Company. Welcome, Shawn. Chris Mallett, Corporate Vice President, Research and Development of Cargill. Teressa Szelest, President, Market and Business Development, North America, BASF. And José Méndez-Andino, Vice President, Research and Development, Owens Corning. Welcome to all 4 of you. One of the things that the Minnesota Cup emphasizes is energy, and the 2 others are clean technology. So Shawn, either in all 3 of these areas or one of these areas, could you tell us a little bit about what Dow is doing?
Absolutely. I mean, water is a strategic focus for us, both in how we're using it in our process facilities, but in our water business as well. So we're constantly developing new technologies related to reverse osmosis and ion exchange to push the realm of innovation on water-related products. But also within our manufacturing facilities, we're making major strides in finding ways to reuse water. So for example, in our Freeport facility, which is our largest manufacturing place, we're taking municipal gray water, finding ways to actually use that in our process facilities, and then cleaning that back up before we send it back into the Brazos River. And then also, taking a look at our Terneuzen facility in the Netherlands, we are finding ways to use reverse osmosis to demineralize materials, and then we're able to drastically reduce the amount of fresh water that we're having to take into our processes.
Very good. So turning to you, Chris, in any of these 3 areas or all 3, what is Cargill doing?
Well, we don't have a water business and we don't have an energy business, but we do use both of them obviously extensively in our processes, and we have made some commitments in concordance with the Paris Accord about what we're going to do in terms of reducing our water use and reducing our energy use in our own processes. The focus I want to bring about now is on clean technology. So we process a lot of biomass, and as a consequence we have a significant bio-industrial business. Some of our customers are sitting around the table here, and we will expect to continue to expand and develop that particular business. And so one of the more familiar ones that people may be aware of is polylactic acid, made by NatureWorks, a joint venture with PTT, the Thai chemical company, where, particularly for sports stadia, the cups and cutlery and plates are made out of PLA, and when they're finished they're chucked in a special bin, and they are picked up in multiple trash trucks and taken off for industrial composting, and the result, as you possibly know, is carbon dioxide and water. So we're spending a lot of time on the clean technology. We focus less on replacing replacing petroleum-based products. We're more on doing things that are difficult from either petroleum or from other sources, and that biotechnology based on things like either natural gas, or, as you'll hear from me later this morning, or things like dextrose. We ferment those into all sorts of other products for bioindustrial activities.
Right. Yeah, I do remember attending a dinner at PTT. You know, we have a very close relationship at Chevron with PTT, and all of the cutlery and the crockery was made out of bamboo, so maybe Cargill had something to do with that. So with that, Teressa, first let me thank BASF for hosting a C-suite conversation on diversity and inclusion later on this month in Houston, so thank you for your sponsorship of that. So in your area, in any one of these three areas, clean water, energy, or clean technology, could you share with us what BASF is doing?
Well, I'd like to start with the clean technology.
Right.
It's interesting because I actually prefer the phrase cleaner technology.
Right.
All of our companies are always developing the next generation and trying to get cleaner technologies. What's clean today may not be clean tomorrow.
Right.
So it's this evolution that we continue along. I'd like to talk specifically here about four-way catalysts. For years, we've had three-way catalysts that remove carbon monoxide, NOx, and hydrocarbons from the exhaust of an automobile. But after 150 years of developing technologies in BASF, we knew we had to take it one step further.
Mhm.
And the automotive industry is an important one for us. So how to make the catalyst system even better? Remove the particulates. So we used a coating on a ceramic substrate that actually catalyzes the particulates. So now we've got 4 key pollutants that can be removed at once. It's very important for the Europeans right now in the automotive industry because of the new regulations that are coming out. Now, these regulations are likely to come to the United States in form of revised CAFE standards at some point. And we're working with the automobile manufacturers today across the globe. So whether it's a four-way catalyst, it's lightweighting materials to make a car more energy efficient, or putting on coatings that add different performance to an automobile, it's just one industry. But I do prefer the word cleaner technologies rather than just clean, it's done, and we've got the magic potion right here and we will never modify it again.
Continuous improvement.
I think continuous improvement is so important in anything we do in this area.
Terrific. Owens Corning, you know, in these three areas doesn't really jump out as to what you would be involved in, but from what I understand, you were, Jose, very involved in all three of these areas. So maybe you would like to highlight one of the areas of focus for Owens Corning.
Yeah, that's correct. And, you know, we're blessed because if you think about it, I'll argue we manufacture sustainable products. So every day, day in and day out, we manufacture sustainability. So our products have impacts in all three areas. And sometimes through one product line, we can impact one or more of the areas that you mentioned. For example, since it was brought up by one of our colleagues here, our insulation is a great example. Insulation on its own delivers a great sustainability benefit to society. So the moment we deliver that insulation to buildings, we are delivering a sustainability benefit. But for us, that's not enough. We have to make that product in a sustainable way, continuous improvement. For example, it's great that you mentioned that. Think about this. It takes about, we have reduced the energy that it takes to make that insulation over 94% over 4 decades. Our commitment to sustainability, you know, goes that far. But we don't stop there. Today, our EcoTouch insulation, our main product line, with the help of industry partners, is made formaldehyde-free, 99% natural ingredients, and of those, 58% come from recyclable and renewable sources. That's a great sustainability story for us. And there are more examples on some of our composites areas and roofing, which I will be discussing during our session today. But that's how we try to make an impact, combining R&D, sustainability, to advance those areas.
Very good. Well, all three, 4 of you are engaged in cutting-edge R&D, really impressive examples that you've shared. And we have a community called AIChE Engage, and we also asked them for what was on their mind, and then we ranked them basis, what was the most popular choice. And apparently, this issue of commercialization of R&D from the lab to actual use is extremely important. And apparently, one of the catalysts is industry participation. That, you know, the ability to deliver a profit from an investment is extremely acute in industry. But perhaps when industry is not involved, it is a very long process, and the data shows it takes a long time from conceptualization to commercialization. So starting with Jose, if you could tell me what ideas you have to accelerate R&D commercialization when there's no industry participation. What advice do you have for labs and academia?
It's a great question, and there's not an easy answer, but I will try to offer my perspective in those cases where an industry partner probably was not involved at the front end of that innovation process. I believe that technology transfer offices within academic settings should continue to evolve their staffing practices, including people that have go-to-market experience and more like experience in industry, putting products in the marketplace, not necessarily because the academia has to do it, but people that can help frame, define, develop, and demonstrate the business potential of that idea earlier on, so it makes that translation easier, so both parties can better understand what the opportunity is. It will give an opportunity to the academic institution to better explain the possibilities of their innovation, and for potential industry partners for easy scout evaluation and adoption of those technologies. So I think staffing practices could play a big role.
All right, Teressa, thoughts?
Well, as a member of industry,
Right.
I like when we're involved in R&D with the labs. But I also understand that there needs to be an exploratory phase. And that's the great thing about innovation and research, to allow time to come up with ideas, to test different options. But at some point, the team needs to step forward and decide it's going to solve a problem or meet an unmet need.
Right.
So there's got to be some destination in mind after you get out of that exploratory phase. And when you start talking about defining the problem or the unmet need, you can work with customers, you can work with academia, you can work with government, you can work with architects, you can work with NGOs. There are a whole lot of groups and stakeholders that you can bring to the table to help refine, like, what problem am I really solving with this research? You know, getting to the market with a viable product concept can happen a couple of different ways, but I always believe that sometimes we wait for a perfect solution and we wait too long, and I wish more would come in small, show the proof of concept,
Right.
and then grow. We want something big and fantastic, and that's not always going to work. You know, it's actually interesting today, earlier today, we were with NORA, which is our R&D cooperation with MIT, Harvard, and the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, celebrating our 5-year anniversary of this collaboration, working on advanced materials, and we announced just this morning, made a press release that we're going to expand that by 5 years, but we're also expanding the scope of the work to digitalization, to bioscience, to catalysts, and also working with startups. So industry may not be at the table, but industry may be supporting some of those launches from academia in different ways.
Yeah, that's a very good point, that before you get to the 100% solution,
Just
the 80% solution can solve
go.
80% of the problem.
Exactly.
And we kind of learned some lessons from our friends in tech. Chris, your
So
thoughts?
Shariq, thank you. I make a couple of comments. I just want to underwrite the comment that Teressa said. We in the big industry strongly support discovery-based science without a particular industrial application in mind.
Right.
It's important that the universities do not collectively become so focused on commercializing their research that the fundamental research is neglected.
Right.
And I'll be very surprised if you hear anything else from any of the large companies who rely on that fundamental research. So having said that, when it comes to potential application, I'd say there are a number of issues. One issue which is relevant in the US, but not in the rest of the world, and I saw the question came from England, from Bath, is that who owns the technology? It is the case that in the US, often with universities owning the technology, it becomes more difficult to commercialize the technology directly with an industry leader, and it usually goes via a startup supported by a venture capitalist. In Europe, there are other opportunities, partly because there is a much more sophisticated route, as it were, in terms of who owns the technology. But in the end, the fundamental driver of an industry wanting to take a technology up is an economic driver.
Right.
Is there an economic benefit? And just finding another way of solving the problem, if it has no advantage over the other, of the existing way, and particularly if the conversion cost is a challenge, is not such a good idea. And so not every idea which seemingly has an industrial application actually will have industrial application. Or if it does, it may only be a niche application with a company with a particular set of assets. I would, however, counsel people who think they have something to potentially talk to an accelerator or startup, if only to get some early financial feedback on the viability of the particular technology in matter on the one hand, and to get some idea of the time scale and what it's going to take on the other. In the product making business, scaling times are quite long usually, longer than the typical patience of venture capitalists.
Right.
And so it's an issue of how patient you are and where you can get the monetary support,
Right.
usually with a strategic partner like the companies around the table.
Exactly. Yeah, I was at a meeting where a proposal was made to a venture capitalist, and a whole bunch of them actually, and it was amazing to see how differently they think for various reasons that we are all too familiar with. So Shawn, what about yourself and Dow? What are your thoughts on this?
My colleagues have called out many very good things here, and one point I do want to make is even the evolution is thinking about this partnership between academia and industry over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, we wouldn't even ask this question, right? So folks are focused in on how do I go from invention, get through the valley of death, and get it to commercialization. And like many of the folks here, Dow is sponsoring as much fundamental research as we possibly can. It's a drop in the bucket versus the fundamentals that we actually need to have happen. That being said now, to the heart of the question of what can folks do that don't have a direct industrial sponsor as part of their program? And it gets back into this mindset of thinking about what is the problem I'm solving? What are the small positive derivatives I can make along the way that's showing how do I get to that final answer? And nothing impresses me more when I bring an interview candidate that's working on a technology that is 40 years down the road. But they can go to me and they can articulate, look, I understand I need 6 home runs to make this happen. But here's the first step. If we get this, this is where we go next. This is what I have to do to make the next thing get there. And just encouraging our researchers to think about that a bit more. Where does it have to get in terms of thermodynamics? Where does it have to get in terms of economics? And bringing that into your mindset. And then once you think you've got something like that, calling out the tech transfer offices or the venture capitalists and seeking some feedback, right? You don't have to have an industrial partner on your project to get industrial feedback. There's multiple consortia, there's multiple different interactions that we have with our strategic universities that offer seminars, that offer even office hours to say, here's how you can get some feedback and the 4 questions that I would ask if you're going to bring a technology to me. I encourage everybody to find some of those individuals to get that direct feedback from. I call it kind of having your individualized own board of directors that can challenge where it is you're going to necessarily go on something.
Excellent concept of your individual board of directors. Well, Shawn, Chris, Teressa, José, thank you for sharing your wisdom, your advice, and hopefully we can come back to you with some additional clarifying questions should the CHE community want to explore this further, and look forward to a later meeting that we're going to have here today, which will involve a discussion of sustainability and innovation. Our thanks again to the AIChE Foundation, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.